Okay, Stephen, so the last bike we'll look at a mountain bike. People might think, well, only a mountain bike to commute on, but actually another bike that I really like to commute on. So over the years I have went in and out of work on a mountain bike again because of some of the plus factors we'll look at in terms of commuting. Great bike to buy as well because you can do lots of other things on it as well if you want to have a bit of fun on it. So over to you to take us through the main features of a mountain bike.
Okay, probably the first thing that I would consider changing on a mountain bike to make it a commute bike is probably purchasing a set of tyres. This particular set of tyres that comes off spec on the bike is a knobbled set of tyres, which obviously come alive in gravel and mud. The reason why you would change that is it just is quite noisy when you're pedaling it on tarmac, and really it would slow you down. You would be needing to put extra effort in for less reward. But a set of tyres, which is not an overly expensive item, can really transform this bike from a mountain bike to a commuting bike. Probably one of the big advantages of a bike like this is the position you ride in. It's a very upright, comfortable position, which most people find beneficial when they're riding to work. One of the other big benefits of this bike, probably two that stand out, would be the forks and then the gearing system. Well, if we're starting with the forks, this particular fork has a lockout system, so when you're on the tarmac commuting, you would want to lock the fork out, which is just dialing in at the top of the stanchion.
Yeah, and so for people who don't know, then the fork's basically a suspension system.
It is. This particular fork is an air graded fork, so for the weight of the commuter, so that would be your physical body weight plus the weight of the items you're wearing and the items in your pannier system. There is a specific then PSI that needs to go into the fork, so that the fork's not too soft or too hard. So yeah, you can either have this opened or closed, or locked or open. And really, when it's locked, that means there is very, very little give in the fork, so it feels quite a rigid frame. But when you open it, if you are on a bridle path commuting to work, or you happen to go through a forest on the way to work, then you can open it and then the fork actually suspends.
Okay, and so the reason just behind that is obviously if you have a lot of travel in the fork and the fork is open, or the setting's open, if you try to say get away quickly at a set of lights, if you were commuting, the problem will be the fork will actually start to depress, isn't that right?
Correct, yeah.
Which will actually then take power out of you going forward.
Correct.
And the power will go into the fork flexing rather than the actual.
It's a very comfortable ride with the fork open. However, as you've said, you're really compromising the power that you're putting into your pedal stroke. The bike is eating up much of the power that you're meant to be sending to the back wheel. So the second feature on this particular bike, none of the other bikes we've looked at yet in the videos have this particular system. This is what we would call a one-by system. So the huge advantage to that is that you no longer have a second or a third ring. That means you do away with the shifter on the left hand, so the bike weight comes down, and also for the commuter then it's just something else that can't go wrong because it's not on the bike. So what they've done is to enable you to go single ring on the front, they have made the cassette, which is this particular portion of the bike here, they've made it such a wide ratio of gears, ranging from a 10 or 11 tooth at the bottom, which is quite a stiff gear to push against, right through to a 42 tooth climbing gear at the back, which means if you do live in a hilly area and are commuting home or commuting into work, you've got a gear which is really quite light and easy to push against.
Have some fun at the weekend though.
Yes, correct.
Go up a couple of hills.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so traditionally then the mountain bike would be like we discussed in the hybrid bike at the start, the 3 chain. You mean traditionally the mountain bikes were all nearly 3 chain rings in front, so you had actually 3 different chain rings. And this would probably be something similar to the middle chain ring and the original sort of mountain bikes that people may have seen in the past.
But to get so that there's a gear for every environment, they've really changed the ratio at the back here to make that the spread so much bigger. But I say probably the biggest advantage for the commuter in this particular system is that you actually don't have another chain ring to go into, so that the chain isn't going to be dropping off. If your gears aren't indexed properly, sometimes one of the things that we find is that a chain will drop off the chain ring and then you have to put it back on again and your hands are oily and dirty when you arrive into work. This does away with that.
By index you mean basically when you hit the gear that goes into the right thing, so the chain's seated right and doesn't rub against the
correct.
cause.
So the system that all bikes really employ, certainly the vast majority of bikes in that sort of up to the £1,000 price point, it is a cable. That the tension of the cable, it dictates the change of the gear. So if you get a little bit of slackening in the cable tension, your gears can really be wobbling everywhere and not quite hitting the gear that you want. But as I say, with this particular system, you're doing away with the hassle of a front derailleur which moved the chain across those 3 or 2 chain rings at the front.
Okay. Again, disc brakes.
Yeah, disc brakes
pretty
again.
much synonymous with a mountain bike these
Yes,
days.
absolutely. You'll find that you'll often find on a bike, this particular bike comes in at a price point of £850, and then obviously your deductions on the cycle scheme. You'll find that this particular item on the bike here, this part is called the disc rotor. You'll find that the front is often slightly bigger than the back. And that's just for extra braking performance in the front.
Exactly same in the car.
Yes,
so if
correct.
you've got a good car, your discs in the front of the car are bigger than the discs in the back. And in fact, I don't know if it still happens these days, but in the past you've had discs in the front and actually drum brakes in the back of a lot of cars.
So this really is trickle down. We talk in the industry about trickle down technology. This is trickle down technology from the automotive sector that has come into motorbiking and then into mountain biking, and now then has obviously moved through that system into road biking. So yeah, we've covered much of the advantages of disc brake, and you'll find that certainly at this price point in mountain biking, you'll find them all with disc brake.
Yeah, and again, hidden cables, easier to clean.
Yes, easier to clean
compared to the 3 or 4 cables you used to have on an old mountain bike. I see you've got extra.
You've extra lugs here as well, so you can actually carry a second bottle if you wanted.
Or use a third bottle.
Yes, or you'll find that the toolkit, or you'll find that these particular ones, there's a couple of companies that have designed a mudguard that fits with the spacing of those eyelets. So in terms of mudguards on a mountain bike, there are various different products obviously out in the marketplace, but there are some really quite neat front mudguards that fit underneath the crown of the fork. And then again, if you look at the back here, there are eyelets that are ready for panniers or ready for some mudguard systems. Remembering, of course, if you go for a rear pannier, some people will use that as their mudguard because they'll probably end up with a top box on it, and that top box effectively is acting as your mudguard.
Yeah, I mean, I've used the mountain bike quite a bit for commuting over the years. I do actually like the mountain bike for commuting. I do have 2 sets of tyres, though, I must say.
Yes.
From sort of time on the road with these, they are very noisy, as you say, and they also put a bit more effort into it. And if you want to do a bit of training, that's not a bad thing. But if you want to get in and out of work as efficiently as possible, then a smoother tyre is going to be an awful lot better. I think the reason why I like these again, the suspension, if you're hitting potholes, again you can run the wheel. The tyres are a lot softer pressure, so there's a lot more comfort involved in it. They're quite a stable bike because they're built for going up and down mountains, so you actually quite reassured of stability when you're with cars around you. Again, if you need to hop up a curb or something, get a danger, they're quite an easy thing to do as well. So I mean, I think all the bikes we looked at, if it's me, the mountain bike and actually the gravel bike would be my 2 favourite to commute on. I haven't got a hybrid bike, but it's one I haven't never bought because I've never actually seen personally use for it. I understand somebody who just wants to commute, that the hybrid is a great bike, but for me, the type of bike I got, this is one of my favourite bikes for actually commuting on, because of the stability and all the rest of it. And then obviously at the weekend, if you want, you could take it up.
Yes, you can take it to your local forest park.
Yeah, and have we go around. There's lots of now tracks around the country and lots of forest parks you can go on, and people have actually set stuff up, going from quite extreme stuff that most of us wouldn't want to go on to quite simple actually paths for even the kids and everything on. So anything else about the mountain bike before we?
No, I think that was pretty much covered everything that we need to.
I was going to say, and the single chain ring, easier to clean and all the rest of it as well.
Just less hassle.
Yeah,
it's just less
hassle. In terms of maintenance then, again, on this type of bike, most of them are the same. You're probably looking at, if you can't do it yourself, and having to come into the bike shop, then having to, I suppose, maybe get somebody to do it at least once a year.
Yes, correct.
Things like the forks especially. I mean, I can do quite a lot of bits and pieces on the bike, but the forks are one thing that usually I wouldn't touch myself.
There's certain things you don't want to touch because you'll do away with your manufacturer's warranty. But I mean, again, anything that's chain driven, if the chain is kept clean, rust free, and an optimum amount of lube on the chain, not too much, not too little, it will run true for a very, very long time. A chain generally will give you approximately 1,000 miles, depending on obviously the weight of the rider and if it's a hilly commute or a flat commute. But in the industry, we use 1,000 miles as the benchmark for the lifespan of a chain, as long as it's looked after.
Yeah.